Today, we're going to talk about real parent power on Freedom Friday.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free.
Welcome, friends and family. It's another Freedom Friday, and you are still not free, but hopefully you will be freer after this hour with me and my special guest today, who is the one and the only Dr. Charles Cole III. In the house to talk about real parent power. We are not going to mess around today because let's get straight into it. Nationally, there's always a lot of talk in education circles about parents, power to the parents and parents' rights, this and that and the other, and blah, 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 blah. Half of it's a phony discussion. Today, we want to talk about specifically what is the parent power that marginalized parents should have, specifically Black parents. What kind of power should they have at the local level, just in their house with their kids, their communities, but also broader at the national level. Dr. Cole, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today, sir.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Well, listen, you are perfect for this conversation around parent power because you have been carrying a message for a long time about what real power should look like for Black parents. And you've talked about the agentic parent, the parent that has agency, and agency seems to be the one thing that gets stripped away from our parents, specifically from Black parents. No matter where they go, like they join parent groups and they're treated as if they don't have agency. They're corralled into very specific actions, and they're told what to think and what to do or whatnot. And society has done that just period over a long period of time. So first of all, let's just talk about let's start with, you wrote a book for Black parents that they can get and that they can access right now. As you're listening to this, you can go get it. Tell them how to do that, first of all.
Yes, Charles Cole III, charlescoleiii.com. And then there's a link for the Black Agentic Parent with a splash page, and then it's a free download, and it's there, and it's been there for about a year, and it's basically, it's not just a bunch of words, it's modules. It's visual. It's to help you kind of go through this process. And, we break it down into three basically parts, right? Like basically easy digestible parts. The first is what has to happen before we even get to the school building. Like, do you have these conversations with your kids? Do you know what your kids' favorite things are? Do you know what makes your kids smile? Do you know the best type of environment they thrive in? Do you know how they respond when they're pushed or when they're at the brink? Once you do that work, and then goal setting for your kids and all that, right? And setting a vision. Once you got that, how are you establishing things at the school? How are you building a good relationship with your kid's teacher? How often are you checking in? We have a visual organizer that helps you with that. And hopefully I'll get some funding to turn into an app where you just input all these things in your phone or your laptop, and it would automatically populate your intro letters and things like that. And if you got an issue, here's how you go about an issue, just the facts. Here's all the correspondence. And then after that, because all education does not happen in the school, you know what I mean? And it's like, yo, what is your super team? Meaning that you might be a mom, a dad, a group, whatever. It might be a bunch of you. You have to be the quarterback of that team, but you don't have to be everything. So, I did this as a social worker. We would have a list of my kid's coach, my kid's favorite uncle, my kid's favorite teacher, put them all in the same email chain. And now you can do a text chain. So let's say Chris is my father, and we got an argument this morning, and I stormed out the door. Chris is hitting that group chat and saying, hey, Charles and I had a fight. He's a little on edge. So when I get to that school, that favorite teacher is coming to check on me right before I get kicked out of class because of my behavior. My basketball coach is checking in on me at basketball practice. That favorite uncle that I love, that I listen to more than my father or my mother, is putting his arm around me and having that uncle talk, right? Everybody is working in accord around Charles's success. And it's just some simple tools. But when you put them all together, it makes you a really, really powerful agentic parent.
And what I love that I heard in that is that there's a village mentality to it too.
It has to be.
Right? Because you could try to do it all on your own, but the truth is we're all interdependent and you're not on your own. I've heard you say before, and I've said it before, we've both been saying for years, Black people, you are on your own, and Black parents, you really are on your own when it comes to education. The truth of the matter is that's only half true. You're on your own if you're expecting anybody to come save you from some other group, some other race, some other people or whatnot. You're really on your own with that. When it comes to our collective liberation and structural and freedom and all that stuff, you are not really on your own, and you can't do it by yourself. So I love this village mentality that you just said. And you also named something just in that too that I want to say. When we talk about parents, I think oftentimes we are conflating parent with mom. And I just want to be real clear that there is more than mom. There are dads, and you just named. There are coaches, there are pastors, there are uncles and friends
favorite
and
teachers. There's that one teacher
teachers,
that you like,
right?
you know?
Yes. So let's stop with this nonsense around like dividing us up and pretending like we don't all have a vested interest in our children doing well. You start your first chapter with a message around telling Black parents you deserve better. Why is that such an important message to start with? Why did you think that was the message to start with?
I used to say this on A Black Hands all the time, man. And it has been the hardest part of my job, both as a social worker and in education. And I'm at this conference talking to parents, and I spent 15 real minutes talking to these people because there's a lot of guilt, especially with Black parents, right? That we tend to deal with guilt, and we tend to feel like when we're not getting the things we deserve, it's because some deep-rooted things of shame that we have had. And so I have to spend time telling you, I don't care what you did. I don't care if you got a PhD or you only went to the 3rd grade. Your kid still deserves a good education. I don't care if you've been to jail before and for some heinous crimes, or if you've been somebody that's been a saint your whole life. You still deserve good education for your kids, and like having them let that go. There was a lot of tears when I did that yesterday, and I had to give space and room for that, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? And I think we are a people that there's a deep spiritual connection. I'm not saying we're all religious, but I do think there's a lot of deep spirit work, and we all have a lot of guilt, and we carry it in a lot of ways. I can't speak to other groups because I'm not in those groups, and I'm not discounting those groups, right? Like, but I know in ours, every time I start that way, I got to give room for people to cry and to get it out and give themselves permission to be what they need to be for their kids. Like, you have to do that, right? And I think that that's just so important. I mean, I deal with that. I deal with that in a whole bunch of ways. I deal with the guilt that some of my best friends that I think were better people than me, like, are just not here. They're like dead. I think about the dumb mistakes that I've made, right? Or when I've said the wrong thing, and it's like, well, damn, I get to be in this hotel talking to these people and people pay me to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it messes with you at times. And I think that while the power structure, while those in power, those people that have historically been in power, they ain't feeling guilty about nothing. And if they are, they ain't telling you about it. They feel like they deserve everything they got in this place, regardless of the history and what it took to get to this moment. They like, hell, I'm an American and I'm not apologizing for it. And I'm not saying we need to adopt that level of blindness, but what I am saying is you need to stop apologizing to those people. You know what I'm saying? You save that for your God and your partner, but you need to advocate fully for your child, regardless of whatever you've done in your life.
You have a second main point that you make too, though, is you are the expert on your child.
Yes.
What do you say to parents who don't feel like they are the expert of their child?
Yeah, and I want to, and they usually get really technical, right? You and I have talked about the actually people. For y'all that's listening, it's a secret code language that Chris and I have. But when you're talking about something that's kind of not that big of a deal, and somebody actually, you stated that wrong, right? What I mean when I say you are the expert on your child, I'm not saying that you are a child, a pediatrician. I'm not saying that you are a child psychologist. What I am saying is that you gave birth to this child. You have access that a lot of other people don't. There are things, you set a home structure that other people, don't have the necessary power to, and you have to own that. You have to claim that. So you have to go and do the work to kind of be able to, when your child is at a new school or with a new teacher or principal or coach, to say, hey, let me give you the skinny on my kid, because this kid is brilliant. And I'll use an example of my good and dear friend, mentor, and brother, Chris Stewart, right? Chris has a son. And I remember you telling the story on A Black Hands, where it's like somebody was trying to tell you that your son was lethargic, I think was the word, that was highly offensive to you. And you like, I'm with this boy every day. I promise you he might be a lot of things. Lethargic ain't one of them. And I wish you would call him lethargic again. And guess what? You're not dealing with his mom today. You're dealing with me.
Mm-hmm.
and you get to see me. That's what I mean about that agency and being an expert. Now, of course, you would say logically, right? Look, if my kid breaks his leg, I'm not the expert on that. I'm not the expert on nutrition. I'm not the expert on all these things. But you're not going to put these labels on my boy when I'm here and I'm active and I know this boy. I know this boy's soul. That's what I mean. And so, listen, you can always find an excuse or reason to shirk your responsibility, but that don't change it from being your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to say for the record, the story that you just told, that particular son of mine is one of my funniest children. And he is the best eyewitness to anything. If he was outside and there was a crime and the police came, he would say, listen, this is what happened. And his memory on every detail, what the person was wearing, how they were walking, everything like that, you can count on it. You can count on the fact that it would be he's super observant and funny and sharp. And he's also honest. Like, he's the type of kid where I say, did you break this? He'd be like, yeah. he don't even take a second to lie. I could just so if I come in the room and there's 3 of my kids that are still in school. If I come in the room and I were to say, what happened? Who broke this lamp? Silas would say, listen, what happened was, and I could trust that what comes out his mouth was truth. So when a teacher tells me that, he's kind of lethargic or something like that, and uses a word like that, I'm knowing something that you're talking about in your book right away is, no. I know this child very well. This child is funny. This child is gregarious, creative. He's a lot of things, but the one thing he's not is the thing that you were telling me right now. And I'm not going to second guess myself because you're supposed to be expert. I'm the expert on this part, to your point that you just made. I may not be the expert on pedagogy. I may not have a master's degree in education. I may not have a lot of things, but I know this kid is not lethargic. So I'm an expert on some shit you don't know about. Let's go on to a point that you make in chapter 2 about being able to articulate the beauty and the strengths of your child. You say part of an agentic parent is being able to articulate the best qualities of your child to others so that they can best serve their needs. We know how you feel about your child or your children, but it can be helpful to expressly write those things out so you can properly articulate them to their teachers. So there's a couple questions I have about this. Number one, just the point in general, why you think it's so important to be able to articulate them. I mean, I know my kid is funny and gregarious and creative, but why do I need to be able to articulate it? And then 2, you go a step further and want me to write it down. So, like, first of all, you give me a lot of homework here, homie, and I don't like it. But tell me why this is important.
Man,
articulating and writing.
I think you know this, but you might not. I started my career as a social worker, and in doing that work, I worked with 2 groups. I'd work with foster and I work with foster families, right? And I did a lot of reunifications. I reunified a lot of families in my time as a social worker. The other part was I worked with kids with special needs, kids on the spectrum, kids that were having extreme behaviors, and they called us in right before parents were about to remove them from the home. So one of the practices we did was something like this, right? A variation where write down everything that you know and love about your kid, right? Because we're about to make a real permanent decision. And for the record, I want to set this record straight. These were not bad parents or anything like that. I'm talking about extreme behaviors, right? And there were some major decisions that had to be made. And it did 2 things, Chris. One, it reconnected you with this thing, this person, this being that God has blessed you with that came from you. Like it's a real strong, writing is a real strong thing, and having to read that on the paper, because they would have to read it to me before we made a final decision, right? The second thing is you learn where your gaps are. So even if you look at some of the questions, and I got some right now, like, who are the people my child admires? And some people will be like, me and my daughter is best friends. She's 14, and I ask that question, and be like, oh shit, who does little Julie admire? I don't, or what motivates my child? I know, no, you tell me what motivates you, what motivates that child, right? And what it did is it would force a conversation between an intentional conversation between a parent and child, right? Where you really get to learn more about this kid. And you would be surprised. People that you'd be like, man, this is parent of the year. They all had gaps, and they were like, people would come back to me in tears. And I knew that I had to recreate a version of this, to allow for parents to know those gaps and to be able to articulate the way you did, the way you just demonstrated when that lady called your kid lethargic. But the other thing was, I wanted to be able to get them that piece of joy. Like, fill that out for your kids. And I think you will have some joy. And I think you'll also like, what upsets my child, right? Like, understanding and knowing what upsets your child can really change the dynamics in your home, right? And so, this came out of the necessity from dealing with young people that were neurodivergent, that were having extreme behaviors, so we can make an environment safe for their siblings, for their parents, for them. But it's really, really useful across the full spectrum in many houses. I think if we could do A Black Hands again, I think it'd be like, yo, let's actually do some of this work, right? Let's like really, oh shit, Charles has some triggers, yo. Like, Charles has some things, and if you say certain things to him that don't seem big to us, we don't understand why he is spazzing like this, right? And it's because partially because, and I mean, we ain't got to go into detail, but you've seen that. You've seen me at some of my worst moments, and I had to come back or whatever. But it's like, oh, well, if I understand that, like, man, he done have friends killed, he done seen people shot in front of him, he done dodged these other things, and he comes from a place where respect means something different than it might to you because you didn't grow up in that type of environment. Oh, okay, I understand it's a little bit different. So I think everybody should take the damn questionnaire, to be honest with you. Take it for your wife,
The thing that I'll say that like I really appreciate about the stuff that you do is you try to simplify it and put it into sections, but you try not to leave somebody without tools to be able to do the stuff that you're talking about too. So it's one thing to preach at people and lecture to people. Parents, you should be doing X. Parents, you should be doing that. And, I could even be guilty of a little bit of that. But, when we did our book for 8 Black Hands on code, I wrote the part about the parents, and I was talking about roles, rights, responsibilities, these things. But you have a set of questions here that parents should be asking, right? And be able to answer, asking themselves, or, be able, things like, what makes my child smile? What settings bring out the best in my child? Who are the people my child admires? Now that's a big one right now. I'm just going to tell you right now, because my children admire some people sometimes, and I'm not co-signing and signing off on who they admire sometimes.
It's good information, brother, but it's good information for you. You need this information because you're like, what the hell am I doing with this kid? That this is the person that they admire. Let me spend some more time with my child right now.
I got one where we've had to have some conversations about Andrew Tate and about Kanye and, whatever. And listen, those conversations with me, especially at the age that I am now, listen, but what are all the things my child is good at? What motivates my child? What type of environment is my child most productive? These are questions that are not defensive questions. These are positive, productive questions that I think engender good parenting, but they are empowering also, because once you know these things, once you've articulated, as you said, I like how you laid this out. 1, know them and be able to articulate them, and 2, write them down and make it part of your knowledge base, which I think is really important. So I don't know if we lost you. You looking frozen there. You there? Okay, good. I was like, did we lose him?
I'm here.
So chapter 3, you talk about goal setting, right? And you do a Bible quote. You started off with a Bible quote that says, where there is no vision, the people will perish. Man, that is deep. That's Proverbs 29:18. And that's a deep way to start off a chapter. But tell me, it sounds like we're getting more work here, Charles. It sounds like you're giving me more work as a parent. What are you telling me that I need to set goals now? What does this mean?
I'm telling you to go in with a vision for your child's success. And listen, we do this visioning. We teach you how to build a vision, and then we teach you how to turn that into a goal, and then we teach you to break that into manageable goals. And when you have that, your questions to your kid's teacher, or the type of programs you put them in, or whatever, it just becomes clearer, right? You need a path. Now, that doesn't mean that path won't change, right? Think about a GPS, or for the old heads here, when you're looking at a Thomas guide, right? And you mark the X at the top of the Thomas guide to where you got to go, there might be an obstruction and you might need to change course. But if you don't have a vision, if you have no idea where you want to go, then you're going to be lost. So this, one of the visioning practices we'll do is I'll say, Chris, picture your youngest child 20 years from now. What do you want to be true for them? Now, look, we know that this kid is going to be autonomous and going to make their own decisions. But what are some things that you want to be true? Well, look, I want them to know who they are. I want them to know their self-worth. I want her to know that she matters in this world. I want her to be able to freely explore the world if she wants to do that. I want her to be a loving person. Well, if that's true, all right, then what needs to be true in 10 years to be on track for that? And then you got to think about that. Well, what does it look like if my kid is 7 now? What does it look like when she's 17? What is she doing? What is she saying? And then what needs to be true in 5 years? And then you go down 2 years, next year, 6 months, 3 months, next week. It's about moving with intention. This is not etched in stone, right? Like you can erase this. You can print out a new copy. You can write it in pencil. You can do whatever you want, but you are constantly thinking about what you want. And like you and I both run businesses, Chris, you know good and well, we can't run a business without a vision of where we are going, because you would just meander and you would just waste money and you won't be productive. So if we'll put that much attention and time into our business or into our fitness or into whatever, why wouldn't you put that type of time into your child?
I love it. You keep giving me more work to do as a parent, though. Keep giving me more work. You have a part in here where you talk about how to introduce yourself to your child's teacher.
Yes.
These type of things to me are so important because we feel like everybody knows everything, and oftentimes parents were real kind of insecure about whether we're doing a good enough job or what we know. We look at other parents sometimes and we think they got it all together and they know everything. And I promise you, people listening to this right now, we don't, and no one does. And the parents that I looked over and I admired, they had problems just like I did. So something so basic as how do you introduce yourself to a teacher is something I struggled with years ago because I actually didn't like going to school. I didn't like going to my children's school. I didn't like being there. I didn't like, I would have to go, for things, plays and meetings and African-American parent night.
Right.
There was even a Black father night in some of them, but just being there, whatnot, gave me the creeps, gave me the heebie-jeebies being in the school setting for a lot of reasons. One, it felt overly feminized, but two, it just felt like I didn't belong there. And there weren't a lot of people that were like me there. I would look around and, oftentimes I would be with people very different. And then I would be having problems with something that you're talking about here, which is just the basic critiques of things, like how do you introduce yourself to the teacher, whatnot. You give like a rundown here, how to introduce yourself to your child's teacher. Let's start with building a relationship with teachers. I think this is so important. The reason I'm pulling this out, because I think it's so important that, yes, you have to be on guard to watch your child's educators to make sure that they are productive with your kid. They're doing the right things with your children. At the same time, you don't need to see it as an adversarial relationship before it is. So if it's not, exactly, you're leaving your kid with this person. You are partners until something's a problem, until you have to check somebody. Until that point, you're leaving your baby with this person every day. So you must have some basic level of trust that it could be a good relationship. So this thing that you're talking about here, tell me how you're thinking about the importance of just even this part, starting the relationship with the teacher, with your child's educator.
Yeah. You want to start that on a good foot, right? And I think you actually said it really well. And I hope people appreciate, I ran this through parents. I ran this through Black moms and dads to make sure that the language was clear and it was direct, right? I didn't want a whole bunch of theoretical, big words types. I wasn't trying to make it so you book me. I wanted you to be able to take it and use it. So when you start that, it's here are these 5 principles, right? My child and I want to be in partnership with you. We all need each other to make this thing go well. My child is a bright and capable human with likes and strengths. That's why we had you do that homework in the beginning. We didn't just have you do it for fun, Chris. What if you can hand this dossier and pictures of this is my most precious creation that God has bestowed upon me, and I am handing it to you with a guide, right? My communication lines are wide open. Listen, that means that if I miss a meeting or if I can't show up at every function, just know that if you are trying to reach me in support of my child, I will make time for you. We will figure something out. I am on your team. I have high expectations for my child in this school. You are imparting something on these folks where it's listen, I don't give a damn if you a 3rd grade teacher, don't give my baby kindergarten work. I hear that kids might be behind. I understand that. My heart goes to them. But this one I need this one getting third grade work, and I need this school to pick it up. And if you are giving out that lower type of work, you need to be articulating why that is and have a plan to get me up to current work. And then you can have high expectations of me. I ended with the strongest one. Like, I am capable as well. I love this child as well. And I might not be a teacher. I might work 12 hours a day, but here's what I'm going to do. Here's my promise to you. That boy going to come to school fed. He gonna behave himself, and he knows how to behave himself. Don't do this thing. And we've heard teachers going to this trope. You as a board member, me working in districts, right? Well, they ain't got no home training. No, I train the hell out this kid. So if this kid is acting up, you need to let me know, because I will come and straighten it out. I will come and handle it. But like, we have to have high expectations of each other. I have to have high expectations of you as an educator. You have to have high expectations of me as a parent. So we both can have high expectations of my child, so he or she can then have high expectations for themselves. You see how that works? You know how many kids we talk to that don't think that they worth shit, that don't think they'll ever be nothing? All of us, Sharif would say this all the time on A Black Hands, right? Like, all of us have had a teacher that said, I got mine. You better get yours. I don't give a damn if you learn this or not. I get paid.
I get paid. Yeah, I get paid whether or not you learn or not.
Yeah. So when we talk about those expectations, I'm not just saying that to poke at parents or poke at teachers. It is ultimately the equation of all these people up top having high expectations leads to Josh Stewart having high expectations for himself in his life. There are things that a Josh Stewart won't put up with that a Charles and Chris did, because we had to go and learn that stuff at a different time in a different setting. But when you got a parent that is grounded with a teacher that is grounded, even if I suck at teaching you math, at the very least, I need you to know that well, this math class is not up to par, Miss Johnson. I need something better. And there's nothing more powerful than somebody that has agency. And when I say agency, I know there's books and I've written one, all that stuff. And I'm gonna explain it the way that I would explain it to my grandmother, as a roundabout of how she would explain it to me. It is what the old folks used to say. It is discernment plus action and approval of that discernment. Meaning, I know what is good for me. I know when something is bad, and I'm not just going to sit here once I realize something is wrong, but I'm going to take the necessary actions to make sure that this circumstance changes. And I'm going to pray and I'm going to have faith, and there's those other elements to it. But there are parts of that equation that need to be fulfilled. Sorry, that was long-winded, but
no, that was great. And you made a point there that I think we should just kind of like unpack just quickly. I'm just going to unpack it in 30 seconds, which is agency is the capacity to be able to make change. It's the capacity to affect your environment. It's the knowledge that you can do something because you have the kinesthetic power and the expressive power to make it happen. The way agency is being talked about now as a concept or a title is different among some different people and different authors. For some, agency means I'm not a victim, which means there's no such thing as racism, which means the world has all changed and it's all better. And now I can just pull myself up by my bootstraps and I don't have to pay attention to societal injustice or structural injustice. And I think that's a fool's agency, because that means when you are getting your butt kicked by the system, you are saying to yourself, I'm getting my butt kicked by the system, but I'm not a victim. I have agency and power, blah, 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 blah. What you are saying, I think, is a more positive aspect of agency, which is you do have power to kind of control your environment and to make things happen good for your child. That doesn't let the system off the hook.
Never.
That doesn't let everybody else off the hook. Just because you have agency doesn't mean that there's other people out there not trying to reduce your agency or take your agency from you.
That thing that you described that's not agency. That is racist propaganda. That is what that is. That is, I mean, it is mental and spiritual warfare that is inside of racial propaganda, right? Like racial propaganda. What, like I said, discernment is, this system is, it is knowing. There's another part that was in there I want to make sure that we say too. It's knowing what's good for me and what's not good for me. So my mother was an avid smoker. She loved, I used to get a note from my granny and my mama, take it to the liquor store, give him a paper. He gives me their cigarettes with a bunch of menthol in it, right? Like, agency is saying, you know what, this is not good for me, but it's bringing me comfort. It's making me feel some kind of way. Well, there's a deeper thing there. What else can give me that sense of relief? Now, I don't know if there's many things that can do it like a Newport 100 from back in the day. I don't know. I'm not a smoker, right? But
And
Exactly, but it's
nothing is
pushing.
gonna beat a Newport when you listen. As a former smoker, I'm telling you, kids don't smoke. But I'm telling you, when you do,
Right.
it's hard to quit.
And for my mother, right, it was like it was a nervous thing. I watched her, I went through NA
Mhm.
with her, but she was also trying to kick cigarettes, right? Because usually, for y'all that don't know, there's a lot of smokers in NA and AA because they giving up one thing and you usually transfer that onto another thing, right? But she was like, you know what? This is my nervous tick. So what she would do is to try to quit smoking, she would replace it with sunflower seeds. So we would have poly seeds all over the house for her, right? To like help her in her journey to try to stop smoking because she knew, okay, this is not good for my health. It's not good for my kids' health. My clothes stink. I don't like this, even though I love me some Newport 100s, right? Like,
Right.
but that's what agency is. It doesn't mean that you were just magically released from this thing. It doesn't mean that the cigarette industry, big tobacco, is not bad and evil and coming
And not
after you.
targeting you. Yeah, not
Right,
targeting you specifically with the most harsh kind of chemicals that while you're in them, they feel
right.
great. But, one thing that I want to highlight here is that you talk about what I think is one of the most powerful partnerships that there can be to make your child academically healthy. How you
Mhm.
support your child's teacher and how you work in partnership with your teacher, I think, is something that has been an understudied area of the academic process. The homeschool relationship and what you do to make the homeschool relationship tight and strong actually is one of the biggest boosters that you can participate in of your child's success, your child's academic success. And you have stuff in here like, questions to ask your teacher. How can I support you in supporting my child? What can we do on weekends in the summer to continue growth? Are there any upcoming events where you need parental support? These are powerful questions, right? Because these questions, when you get the answer to them and you act on the answers to these, they can't go anywhere but good, right?
Right.
And I love this. And I've heard you talk before, even about sitting down with teachers and asking two questions. One is, what grade level is my child on in their studies, in their reading or in their math? And if it's not up to where they should be, asking a second very powerful question. Okay, then what's the plan? Right. So if you ask what grade level is my child on, and the answer is, well, they're not on grade level, but they're approaching basic. They're approaching the approach of the basic that's beneath from, all them other kind of, they're not proficient. That second question I think is very important is, okay, but what's the plan? And, that gives the teacher the opportunity to tell you some things and give you some tools and some things that you might do. And it gives you the opportunity to have some feedback of, well, listen, next time I'm going to need to know this right away. I'm not going to need to know this in spring. I'm going to need to know this the moment you know it, right? But anyways, I think this is a very powerful part of the process. Can you talk a little bit about the tension between watching them, because you have to monitor schools? You can't just be blindly trustful of what they're doing. There's a tension between that, though, and also being a productive partner with them in doing the positive work with your child.
Yeah, I think that it is going back to those expectations. It is saying that, listen, I have a high standard. I am watching. It is signaling these things. And to be honest with you, good teachers like that, Now, if you're getting some pushback and some fight back, well, that's why they have principals. That's why they have a next level, because you should be going to have that conversation. But it is also signaling a few things. Like I said, the first one being that you have expectations. The second one being that I'm also like, I am here to be supportive. I will play my role but you have to have a plan. Like, I might be the coach or the quarterback of this team, but you as my wide receiver has to do your job and catch the ball. So like, because I'm an expert on my child, but not in your field and your vocation, I need you to do the next phase of your job, which is, if my kid ain't up to grade level, tell me how to get this kid there. And if you can't tell me that, say that, and then we'll go find somebody who can. And that's it. And that's it, right? But don't give me a bunch of excuses. And I understand like the growth stuff, right? Listen, I got friends that are teachers, that are principals, and I get it. If you got a bunch of fifth graders reading at first grade level and you get them to third grade reading level, you just need a bone. So you're like, look, I need y'all to measure this growth too. I understand that. I completely get that, right? And that is your business, though. My business is Charles IV. My business is this, right? And like, I understand that, and I have empathy for that. But I need this one to be at the fifth grade level. And if being so, are you telling me that being in this class is going to continue to hinder him? Because if that's the case, then we need to move him to a different class. Are you saying that I need to do everything that you're telling me, and then we need to go find a tutor, and y'all got after school tutoring that can get us the rest of the way there? Okay, then let's do that. But without a plan is unacceptable. It is unacceptable in this educational malpractice. Like if you have a surgeon and a surgeon is saying, "Hey, we got to take this gallbladder out," and like, well, how are you gonna do that? Well, we just gonna do it. What you mean you just gonna do it? Like the surgeons will tell you the surgical plan, even though they know you don't understand a word of it. But they do it because you need to be reassured that these people know what they're doing and that they're going in with clarity. It all comes back to vision and goals.
So you make another point in here that I think is really a hot point. In chapter 2, you talk about the need of parents to collaborate with each other. So this gets to something we just said earlier. You say we are on our own, but you are not alone, right?
Yes.
Which is, I think, a great way to put it. Talk more about that. Talk more about the collaboration, the need for collaboration amongst parents themselves too.
Absolutely. You need a village. Listen, man, do you know how powerful a group of 5 connected parents could be in any school setting if they on point? You have 5 parents that's connected and on the same in accord and has a plan can transform a school. I done seen them get principals fired. I done seen them get better teachers. If you want an example of what this can look like, go to Oakland to a traditional public school called Lincoln Elementary in the middle of Chinatown, where it is 90-something% Chinese students with 90-something% Chinese teachers and Chinese leaders, and a traditional public school settings where you can't really just hire and fire whoever you like willy-nilly, okay? Them people are on point. And I'm not lifting them up to put us down. I'm just saying that these things can work. You don't have to do everything. So let's say Chris and I both have kids in the same classroom and we didn't know each other. And we all show up and we're the guys. And like Chris said, this space don't feel good, but it's 4 dads there. And we start talking, we go out for beers and we're talking about our kids when we love, and we're like, all right, man, y'all, let's look at this. Everybody, let's look at the calendar of what's happening. I work on these days or whatever. Hey, Chris, I know that you said you was going to be out of town this day. I'm going to go to that open house and I'm going to represent for my kid, your kid, and Mel's kid, and Ray's kid, right? I got this. When y'all got me. So now, even when you're not present, you got somebody else there that's advocating for your kid like it's theirs, right? When it's one thing to have one parent or one set of parents holding you accountable about one kid, but when Chris is coming and asking questions about mine as well, and I done gave him a release, and you can release this information to this person, it really is your school at that point. You really are. Listen, Chris, I know I'd give long answers, so I'll end it on this. When me and Antoine Wilson became superintendent, we did these community tours. And we went to all these communities, and we went to the hills. And this traditional public school was competing with private schools. That's how good it was. It's a blue ribbon school. Those moms, it was like 6 of them, bro. They come up to us after the meeting and they said, respectfully, Superintendent Wilson, welcome to Oakland. I just want you to know we run this school. We pick these principals. And if this principal ain't doing what they need to do, we're gonna get them out of there. You know what Superintendent Wilson said? He said, I appreciate that. Like, as it should be.
Yeah, tell me up front. Yeah.
As it should be, right? And I think that is agency, right? That's not entitlement. That is saying you have my most precious resource. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, we got to stop thinking about this as students and teachers and this and that and left and right. But this is my most precious asset. This is my legacy. Like, you think I'm not going to have a say in the quality of this? And if you show me that you don't have the ability to be quality at it, you think I'm just going to sit here? You are out your rabbit ass mind. So I want parents to be aware when schools are out there rabbit ass mind.
You know, their rabbit ass mind. So where this is leading, we have talked about the individual parent, what they can do to help their individual student. We have talked about their homeschool relationship with the school. I think this is the genesis of power and agency. This is the grassroots. This is the root of where it starts, you being involved at those levels. Then when you start talking about collaborating with other parents and the collaboration itself creating power, now that's another level of power. That's community power. And community power is actually the thing you build on to get to the next level, which is kind of political power, economic power, real power when you have community power. because the charismatic one person who's jumping out there or whatnot has never been the model for our success and our advancement. And I just want to point out the reason why this is so important, right? You just talked about the parents who tell you, we really run these schools. I can tell you about principals who have taken jobs, and privileged parents, when you work in a school where the parents are privileged, will let you know in no uncertain terms that collectively they together can make a lot of things happen, right? I've seen a school decide they wanted to change the math curriculum away from what the district wanted, and they pooled their money together and went and bought Singapore math, and they brought it to the principal and said, you will do this. And the principal went to the district and said, you know who my parents are, so you're going to let us do this. You're going to let us be the only school in the district that does this. Now that's power, right? Power is being able to say, when they start redrawing the boundary lines, saying, you know who we are, right? As parents, collectively we are the privileged parents. You will have a problem if you draw that boundary the wrong way. You will have a problem if we don't get access to the school that we want to get access to. That's a different level of power. And I want to talk about it right now because it couldn't be more timely to talk about. This is not new. There has been a history of privileged parents who are politically and socially elevated because of their history, because of the way that the racial caste system in the United States has put parents in different locations on the power totem. And there is a group that rises to the top, and what they care about and their concerns doesn't change local policy. It changes laws nationally. It changes bus routes. It changes boundaries. It changes curriculum. It removes curriculum. It takes books out of libraries. This is an unmatched, unparalleled level of power, right? And you can't blame people who are power hungry and want things their way, because they are trying to raise the presidents of the next generation. They are trying to raise the elites and the power brokers, and that's what they want for their children. So they will use everything at their disposal, including a historic privilege, because we have a racial caste system that has empowered and enriched some people and has left other people in a very bad position and harder to defend themselves. We did this thing at Ed Post called Jane Crow then and now, and it's an historic look at the role of white women in being gardeners of segregation, being gardeners of injustice and inequality in schools. And, wasn't a completely negative take on it. It was a positive take in that there have been people that have fought for us, and there have been people that have fought against us. So you can't paint everybody with a broad brush, right, throughout these fights. But there is no doubt in the fact that when you look at the roots of organizations like Moms for Liberty, which right now is having presidential candidates come to their national conferences. They're having the media talk about them as if they're just any other group of parents, but they're not. Let's look at the difference, right? Let's look at the connection between the past and now. And that leads me to this article. I just want to set this up here. Who's Afraid of Moms for Liberty? It's out now. I don't want to push a lot of people to go read this, but the main thrust of this, look how this starts out. This is about Moms for Liberty. And this is what white moms who want to shield their children from learning that there are different kinds of people in the world. This is how they play the game. This is how it starts when it's talking about them. In a breakout session in a windowless conference room at last week's Moms for Liberty Joyful Warrior Summit in Philadelphia, Christian Ziegler, the chairman of Florida's Republican Party and father of 3 school-age daughters, is stiffening spines. Dozens of attendees, mostly women, are nodding and taking notes as Ziegler explains how it works with local media. Your product is parental rights, he says. Your product is protecting children and eliminating indoctrination and the sexualization of children. You're the grassroots. You're on the ground. You're the moms, the grandparents, the families that are impacted. The stories you tell will help set the narrative. Now, this is a political operative of a major political party who is instructing white suburban moms mostly how to prevent their schools from basically going woke necessarily, which only means having a variety and a diversity of learning within their schools. And they have been marshaled, into this broader battle. Somewhere in here, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to find it right on the spot, there is a quote from somebody who who we know. I think I know. I don't know if you know the person who runs a parent group in Texas who's leaning this direction, actually, and really kind of, uh, 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 is glad that this is becoming the new movement.
I'm gonna say you
She says,
control F it, but go ahead. Never you good.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So she says, basically, she says, um, this is different because this group of women don't need grants. They have money. They are primary voters. They feel themselves. They feel empowers, and they don't have to answer to anybody. And that's their basic power. And that's why they're here now. And that's why they're getting things done. Right. This is a lot of background, but it leads to a question of, we have just talked about empowering our parents to be able to, one, fight for their children, to learn what they're supposed to be learning at the school level and at the community level. And meanwhile, there are power and principalities. Anybody who's Christian and understands there are power and principalities at play in the world that are making sea changes for you, right? There are states that I can say, and people have heard me say this a million times. If you have watched more than one of these shows, you've heard me say this before. There are states now who have made it so that if I move to that state as a person of color, as a Black person who moves to that state, there are books in those libraries that my kids won't have access to, that they have access to right now. There are things that they can learn: Black thought, Black scholarship, Black civil rights scholarship, Black civil rights history. There are things that they can learn in my state that they cannot learn in these states now because of these groups. So anyways, I know this isn't your focus, right? When you were talking about, agentic parenting, right? But I do want to tie the two together and say, we have talked about the grassroots, the root of agency and power. And now I want to see it flourish upward to where we are not getting taken for suckers at the highest level of government, right? The state level, the governors, the people who want to be president one day. What's the answer for this power that we're seeing in this other group?
Well, listen, man, you have to understand the dynamics of power. You remember Ginsu knives? Remember those? Like,
yep.
So here's the thing: a Ginsu knife can be used to chop up tomatoes and fillet fish and cook a meal that your family has never had the luxury of just like a great meal. You can also use it to slice somebody's head clean off, right? The point that I'm making is agency is a Ginsu knife. And how you use it, you can use it for good and you can use it for evil. And there are evil forces in this world and in this country. And to not let down our mentor, our shared mentor, and love, our love for one Dr. Howard Fuller, I'm gonna give you a book, Chris, and I'm pretty sure this book is banned. But it's a book called "They Were Her Property," and if it ain't banned, it will be at some point. And it's basically about, during times of slavery, the power white women wielded and how they tended to be the more brutalizers of slaves. They tended how they manipulated, how they ran their household from behind. But they were more brutal than a lot of white men that had these slaves. Why am I pushing that, right? Because when you talk about these groups such as Moms for Liberty, and I told you before the show, I haven't truly been following them, but I've seen that they've been making waves. And I got to give you respect and kudos because you have been talking about this for a long time. And I actually don't think it's the safest conversation. So kudos to you, right? Because when you hit power like that, it hits back, and it hits back hard. I know that they won a lot of elections, and like you alluded to, I don't want to take credit for your claim, but they're going to use this platform to try to get the president in that they want, and they might be successful. You have to, as you're becoming an agentic parent, you also have to learn the relationship with power and what that means. Because where there is power, there is also room for corruption. There always will be. And I look at this in two ways, right? This is a tree. And some people do leaf work, right? They like, I'm trying to get this apple. I want this apple to be fresh. So I have to do work on these leaves and these branches so I can feed people who are starving right now. That is the game that I have to play. It's an immediate game, right? It is, my people are suffering and starving right now. So that's where my focus is. But some people that don't need to raise money, that they have good middle-class lives, they have good middle-class, paychecks, whatever the case is, they're not starving. They're not worried about the apple. They get to focus on root work. And it's not that we don't think root work is important. It's just that the immediacy of what's happening, I have to deal with right now. But Moms for Liberty is doing root work. And once they do what they want to do, they're gonna poison the whole tree and ain't no fruit gonna come and you still gonna die. So the point that I would say is that Black parents does not just automatically mean Black moms, and it does not automatically mean poor or in poverty. I tend to focus a lot in those places because that's what I came up around, right? But we have a lot of middle class parents. We have a lot of upper class Black people. Don't let it fool you. We got a lot of mixed race people that got Black kids in the mix, right? And we also do have poor people that are able to focus on the root. I would always give Sharif that credit. Sharif and his family have always, regardless of however things were going, I don't know how much money they had. I do know that man had a loving village, and he has always been about the roots, where I've always kind of been about the apple. But there does need to be a collective shift, and we might need to show people how to do that shift. But to end my long ass soliloquy, I would say this is why you need parents to come together. Because if I'm working with a group of parents and we can help sustain the people that need the apple now, so we can all put our attention on the root, then I think that we could really change things, because these people are not doing a week play. They're not doing a year-long play, right? They're not doing something for the immediate. When white power wants to strategize, they strategize for centuries. They are trying to do root work and get certain type of history books out of here so we can rewrite this history and get back to a time when they were her slaves.
You know what's so interesting about this? So first of all, let me say yes on everything you just said, and I did.
I hope that makes sense.
It did. No, it did, and I want to build on it. I do want to go back to the quote. I found the quote. Philanthropists will never be able to control these women. Why? Because these women are college educated. They don't need their money. They also have time. They have skills. They're empowered primary voters. The message they send to elected officials is no, no, no. My kid, my money, you work for me. And if you don't, I'll organize all these other women. You know which kind of women we're talking about. Tell them what's going on and kick you out of office, because that's democracy, right? Democracy is one group of privileged, entitled women having their way with governors and elected officials. That's their version of a good civil rights movement. This is the new civil rights. The new civil rights is for the majority, right? For the historically privileged or whatnot. That's the new civil rights movement. For them, listen, you can't hate it. You can't hate power. You gotta respect.
You just ain't gonna do nothing if you hate it. It's just
I'm not gonna do it.
It just ain't enough to hate it. It's like hating fire for burning.
Yeah. There's a story about a snake, who befriends a person, and the person befriends the snake, and the snake bites him, and he says, well, we're friends. Why'd you bite me? And he said, you realize I'm a snake, right? Right? Like that's which part of me being a snake didn't you understand? What do we do? Like, snakes bite your ass, right? Like, so I was at an event last week, which was school board members from all across the country that have gathered for a conference themselves. It's a different type of conference. These are school board members who are dedicated and committed to maintaining anti-racist action within their school districts, meaning they want schools to be open and welcoming for all kids, including the most marginalized students. And they've taken kind of a commitment. They've made a commitment themselves to be that type of board member, to consider it important and to work for it in their districts. And this topic came up. Moms for Liberty came up on one of the panels, and one of the national activists that I know and I respect the most, who just gets stuff down. She's got the spirit of Fannie Lou Hamer in her, and she just gets stuff done. I've seen her organize big protests. I've seen her shut down police stations. I've seen her shut down highways. She said, enough talking about for Moms for Liberty. What we need are moms for liberation. And everybody clapped and snapped their fingers. And she said, no. We're not just going to clap about this, whatnot. We're not just going to, it's not going to be just a applause line. Y'all going to sign up for something right now. And there on the spot, she created a Instagram group, right? On the spot, like from the stage. She created it at the moment and said, y'all going to follow this right now. We're going to be in touch with each other, and we're going to make this thing happen. And she's got 217 followers, like, pop like that. And this is the way real grassroots action is born. She doesn't have a grant to do this. This isn't something philanthropy is paying for doing. And she never waits. This is what I know about her as an organizer. She never waits for other people. She's real grassroots. And she does understand power. She's a former law professor. She's also a former many things, and a BLM chapter advisor back when that was a thing. And she just gets stuff done. And this is the type of spirit. This is the energy that we need. This is the energy that we need, because she works at grassroots levels to do grassroots issues. She's the first on the scene when a black man gets shot in our state, and she is the first on the scene to hold governors accountable and hold police accountable, hold everybody accountable. She knows what she's doing. This is the energy that we need. This is the spirit that we need. We can't just keep sitting around. There's so many parent groups out here who are so mono-focused on their little policies in their little corner of the world. And I don't want to diss on them, because they're doing excellent work in those individual places. But we will lose all of our voting rights, and they'll still be working on their one little issue where they are, because they have no upward vision. And what we need is people who understand the entire system has injustices in it, and we need to talk about it from top to bottom. So while philanthropies are paying you to talk just about one issue in a very kind of isolated way and not attend to all those other issues, that is the opposite of the Moms for Liberty plan. They want the whole system to tilt towards the advantage in favor of their children, not one part of it, not one policy. They want the whole thing to turn to advantage for their children. And then, listen, that's what we want too. Go ahead,
we
bro.
do.
Jump in.
I mean, and you and I were, like Lisa discussing this beforehand, and my favorite word, my favorite word is nuance. But I mean, but this is what I do think though, and I agree with you. And I was far apart, but I agree with you. But I think that it has to be that village. Then that, if we have to have a plan to take care of those people, listen, man, there were just certain things that I was not able to see and still not able to see because of just what the circumstances were, right? What my immediate needs were. And I get it. I understand it, right? But sometimes being able to look that far in the future is a luxury and a privilege that a lot of people don't have. But, and shout out to Nakima, man. I love her. I spoke at one of her things. She always gets me juice, right? But like you said, bro, Nakima is super smart, super dope, law professor. You know what I'm saying? Like, she knows this stuff inside and out, and she is somebody that's so dope. And if you don't follow her, you should, because she has been on every side of this, right? She has been struggling, and she has been in rooms with some very, very powerful people. It's really difficult, though, if you was trying to get Renata Cole, my mother, in on this when she was still just coming out of addiction and we were living in a shelter. I mean, my mother and father, whom we have our issues at times or whatever the case is, but I'll never take away from them, that even in 4 shelters and 2 crack addicted people, and both people with drug charges and jails and all that stuff, they raised a doctor. And there's something special in that. And you have to find a way to captivate and take that energy and those people and merge them with these people that do have the blessing of foresight. You get what I'm saying? Like, So I'm not saying that we can't do that, but you laid it out. Like, I think Dipple or whoever that was, like, really pointed out, like, look, this is the facts of the matter. You can get mad at that person if you want, right? But just because if you don't like somebody and they're giving you facts are still facts. And so what is the in between plan, Chris? I guess is what I'm asking. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
we got to figure that.
This is what I would say. There is no simple.
Sign me up with it, because I'm down with that.
There's no simple plan. I'll just say this. There's no simple plan for our liberation, our freedom. There never has been. Black people have had to be inventive in pushing the country to do the right thing for generations. Our from day one of fighting for our freedom and our liberation to get us to where we are today, which is in a much better spot than we've ever been in a lot of ways. It required invention, because what will happen is you will win one court battle and they will throw another court battle at you. You will make 2 steps forward and they will take one of those steps back from you in some way, shape, or form. That's just the racial physics of the United States. That is, so talking about it is kind of like talking about rain. It's going to rain on you sometimes, right? That's a fact of weather. A fact of racial physics in the United States is that, you have one action and there will be a reaction, as you said. You said it better. You said when you hit power is going to hit you back. And if it takes them 50 years to hit you back, because listen, in 1964, when they passed the Civil Rights Act, you can't think that was the end of the story. Nobody could have. When you won, Brown versus Board, there were some of the people that worked on that case and said, this won't be a problem in 5 years. 5 years after Brown, we will be totally integrated, and children will be learning together, and they will have forgotten about, the way that things used to be within 5 years. That was one of the biggest middle class miscalculations of Black strategy that I've ever heard of in our history. And the same thing could be said of affirmative action now that we're seeing. Same thing could be said about many of the programs that came out of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. A lot of the protections around voting have been whittled away, and so you make gains, and then some of those gains are going to be taken back, but you have to be committed to the struggle of the back and forth. You have to be, it's a call and response. So right now we're getting response, right? We'll get to the part where we have to make a call again, but right now we're dealing with their response to all of that progress that we made. Everything I'm talking about is just a backlash to the progress that we have made over time. What I say about Nikema Olivia Armstrong that I think is so important, that I have seen as a lesson for us, is just get in and get the job done. Just start doing something. And when I say Fannie Lou Hamer energy, this is a woman from Mississippi, from deep rural Mississippi, who didn't speak the Queen's English, who took her case and outwitted Democrats and went all the way to New York and got on a live feed testifying about what was happening to the poor Black people in Mississippi. How did this woman get from rural Black Mississippi to being on, testifying before the whole nation with a message that was so important that the president had to jump on camera real quick and try and preempt what she was saying, right? That's a level of personal organizing power that we should be thinking about to have some breakthroughs just like that. That's my preaching for the day. Listen, don't get me out here acting like I have answers, because the one answer that I will have, the powers that be in COINTELPRO will quickly marshal in. Right. So
2-hour show today, man, because we can't just leave like this, man. I don't want to. But here's the thing.
Tell me what you gotta say to what I just said. Then tell me what you.
I agree with you, and what I would say is that this is not the first time these things have happened. Go read about the Civil War. And what I'm saying is we are entering into somewhat of a civil war, and I'm not trying to be like hyperbolic, right? But let me give a frame for what I mean. We're about to deal with some issues where neighbors will be pitted against each other. Friends will be pitted against each other. And when the Civil War happened, there were neighbors that loved each other and that were friends. And then the next week they were fighting, right? Like, because of over slavery, people can say what the hell they want. The Civil War was about slavery, right? Like, it was about a few other things, but slavery was the thing. This is about race. This is about race and freedom in this country and what that means and who gets to be on top. And again, 50 years from now, they will give you a bunch of reasons. They'll use it. They'll make up some new words. They'll do a bunch of stuff. But I am telling you, this is about, we don't want these marginalized people to overtake us. We have seen the numbers. We have seen that white people are not going to be the majority. We have seen the Harvard case go through the Supreme Court, where these white supremacists partnered up with some of these Asian parents that don't represent all Asian people. But this is a landmark case that just happened. These are things that are happening. A table is being set. And at the same time, in our country, which is a dumbass country at times, and I love being American. I know they get mad when Black people say that, but I've traveled, right? I've been to other places. France is on fire right now. It's just now starting to calm down. From June 27th to July 4th, France has been in an uprising, in an uproar. And if you grab a random child of any color in this country and ask them what's happening in France, they have no idea. And so, and they're talking about same things that we're talking about here. My point is that not any of us, and I'm kind of not going back on what I said, but I'm adding this caveat. I'm conceding something to you, Chris Stewart. Okay, you should mark this because I won't do this.
Mark it down.
In the same vein that I say that there are people struggling in it, and it's hard to see the forest for the trees, which I empathize with and I tend to agree with. If you're watching this program, that means you got a device. That means you got a laptop. That means you got a phone. That means that you have access to more knowledge and information than Martin Luther King Jr. ever had, than Socrates ever had, than Napoleon ever had, Fannie Lou Hamer, anybody that you admire. There is no excuse for us to be ignorant about certain things that can impact our well-being moving forward. Now, whether we do something about it is on us. But if you got that device and we can go on Instagram or Twitter or Threads or whatever, then you can go and kind of figure out what's happening. I just wanted to, but look, I would start reading about the Civil War. I would start reading about some of these uprisings, because this thing can spiral in a bunch of different ways. I promise you. And this group is gearing up. Like you said, there's about to be a really big election that's coming. And there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of dissatisfaction across the board. There are Republicans that are dissatisfied with Republicans. There are Democrats that are dissatisfied with the Democrats. There are really, really far left people and really, really far right people. And everybody is gearing up for something. So if you're not ready, that means that you are just not heeding these calls. And so, maybe we need to put some classes together or something, Chris, but we got to get our people ready, because something is coming and you either going to be ready for it or you're not. It is that binary. So figure it out.
I think that comes with understanding your history, to see that many of these things, as you say, have happened before. I posted something yesterday about Cicero, Illinois. There's a clip on my Twitter about it, and it's a Mike Wallace report from 1966. Cicero blew up way back then because Martin Luther King, when he took his message out of the South and into the North, that's when real things blew up. And Cicero was one of those places that he went because they had some problems. Now let's talk about Cicero. Cicero at the time was mostly Czechs and Polish people and Germans. They were mostly first and second generation white Americans, meaning they had just gotten here. They were, and they had already adopted America's stance on creating a white suburb that would be just for working class, second generation and first generation white immigrants, whatnot. So anti-blackness becomes the thing that you can sell to almost everybody. You can be here 5 minutes and start hating black people. So black people need to pay attention to this. Now, that's not just me trying to be negative in the main, because I have a broader point, which is division is the main tactic of the enemy. So division, firming up a homogenous, racially redundant group to be in power, and then making everybody else fight each other. So now you mentioned affirmative action. You have Asians thinking that the reason they're not getting into college is because of black people. Black people make up like a small percentage of the people getting in, but 40% of the white people getting in are legacy admissions who are not, right? So let's make the Asians hate the blacks. Let's make the blacks hate immigrants, Mexican immigrants, because they're taking your jobs. Just saw a politician in Georgia say that. So you hate the Mexicans now. The Mexicans, they go to them and they say, you're Catholic, so hate the gays, right? They go to the gays and say, well, you're gay, but look at these trans people over here trying to be women, right? Like that's not right. So what you have, and then they go to Armenians who are Muslims and say to them, hey, listen, they're trying to put a bunch of gay stuff in your schools. You hate gays too, right? Now, 5 minutes ago, they were talking about a Muslim ban, but now they're recruiting Muslims to actually join the anti-gay thing. So when you look at it, you think of this as like a chessboard. You're like, well, damn, if you're a master, you're the meta master. And what is it that you're doing to get all these people seeing themselves as the problem? I think when you see those type of divisions, one strategy that you can have to fight back is not to play into them. Not to join when someone gives you a group of people to hate, not to go to yourself, well, they kind of have a point. Like, I kind of, I hate that group because that's what we're doing right now. And they're not doing that for themselves. They are consolidating their own group, but they're making all the other groups kind of have at each other with a sense of scarcity. I don't know what you think about that, but when it comes to parents, I am not going to be convinced that it is my job to hate trans people or gay people or remove their books from my school. If it ain't for me, it ain't for me. But, I'm not trying to use my parental power to stop other people. Their entire parental movement is based upon division and hate and exclusion and subtraction and removing things from the table. Ours needs to be about multiplication and addition, making sure that there's always more rather than less. So what do you say to that, sir?
Can I channel Miss Ozetta Hooper, my grandmama, again?
Do it.
I'm gonna mix her up and Howard Fuller, man. I think what you just said was very elegant, and I fully agree. I would say it differently. Be adults. Let's just be some adults. Bring your people together and understand that you're not going to agree on everything, right? Because if they know, listen, if you come from a religious background, these people know what to say to get you. The ultimate agenda is to get this black, brown, marginalized group stuff out of these schools. But if they go into talking Biloxi, if they go into talking Kentucky to some black people, they gonna say they putting this ungodly stuff in your schools right now. Like they're gonna attack. These attacks are surgical. The people that are leading this stuff are smart, right? They know not to say what their main goal is. They're gonna speak directly to your interests and what you're about to lose, right? And I think that we have to be adults and say and look at the bigger picture and say, look, I don't rock with this. Like, again, Chris, this is not the first time. And we have a history, we have a blueprint for this. It's called the Rainbow Coalition. And I'm not talking about Jesse Jackson, right? I'm talking about
right.
I'm talking about Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton went to poor white groups. He went to gangs. He went to Latinos. And he said, look, the police are kicking your ass the way they kicking our ass. And we don't have to like each other. But how about we get that issue off the board and then we have a different conversation? And that man was 20 years old, bro. Like, he wasn't 50. He wasn't 80.
We tend to think that they're older because we look at the pictures and they're old-fashioned pictures. We tend to think they were older. That was a young cat. And here's the thing that's so important about what you just said, and it's dangerous. So I'm gonna disavow because when Fred Hampton tripped upon the message of we all in this together, like the entire Rainbow Coalition, they are coming for all of us. That's when they killed him. They shot up his apartment with his pregnant girlfriend in his house. They shot through that door like 20 times. You know, like holes in the door in every place before he even got out of bed. They killed that man. They killed Malcolm X when Malcolm X started talking a more universal message. He went to Mecca. He came back. He started saying, you know, I'm for mankind. I'm for humankind. We all in this together. Boom, he's dead. They went after Martin Luther King when he stopped talking just about civil rights and he started talking about we all need to be in this together. Man, listen, the everybody movement, the movement that's for everybody that is being isolated and marginalized, that's the most powerful and dangerous movement that there is, right? So they are doing a movement that is white parents versus everybody. That's their strategy. White parents versus everybody. What we as white people think, that's what's got to be the rule. It's got to be the dominant. It's got to be straight, white. What's the 14 words? Do you know what the 14 words are?
No.
Have you ever heard what the 14 words are? I'm gonna pull it up right now.
Please do.
So you can hear the 14 words. It's a white supremacist slogan. This is the 14 words that's a white slogan. We must secure the existence of our people and a future for our white children. That's the 14 words. That's the slogan. So when people talk about the 14 words, that's the business plan of white supremacy, of the white supremacists. It's interesting that that's the one thing. It's not about we need to eradicate people or we need to do this, that, and the other. It's about their children, right? Let me say it again. We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. That's the 14 words. That's the business plan of white supremacy. So they are white parents versus everybody else. Well, everybody else is a big ass movement. That's a lot of people, right? So if everybody else can stop fighting and stop taking the bait, this is what they have always done. Irish people, you want to be white, you got to hate the blacks. Italian people, you want to be white, got to hate the blacks. Jews, you want to be white, got to hate the blacks. Right? That's the one deal they make with everybody. Immigrants, you've been here 5 minutes. Guess what? You got to hate blacks too. Black people from Africa and immigrating here. Guess what? Nigerians, got to hate blacks. What? Sign them up, right? Anti-blackness is the one. But I'm starting to think now too, and I'm going to stop here and just say, I'm starting to think that the trans issue is one of the gifts that keeps on giving to them because there are trans haters in every group of people. And what I've resolved to do is I don't understand trans as a thing. I'm not the most educated on whatnot, but I do understand scapegoating. I do understand finding the group that everybody can hate, right? And that's what I think is happening with them. So I'm not taking the bait. I'm not going to listen.
These people ain't never did nothing to me. I ain't never. I don't wake up scared of trans people. I don't wake up. You know what I'm saying? They have not been a threat to my safety. White supremacy has. I've been pulled over more times than I can count. One of which was documented and I shared on our episode. And you know, I actually was surprised at how emotional it made. You know, Sharif in it. I think, you know, when you talk about that, I was born in Maywood, Illinois, the same place that Fred Hampton was born. He went to the same high school as my parents, and all this stuff. And my grandmothers knew him and his mama and all that stuff, man. And that was an Italian town first, right? It was Italian before it was black. And there were always some interesting racial dynamics there, right? Like it's kind of a frenemy type situation. It has always kind of been, and you pointed it out, and people don't want to admit it, but you go read. Like the litmus test is, I need you to not like these black people. I need you to not fool with these people. Like when you convince these Asian folks that black people were the problem and reason that they were not getting into Harvard, not the legacy stuff, not the rate, not the other barriers to entry, right? But black people, and they signed them up, like that changed stuff. This was like 4 or 5. This started a long time ago. I remember talking about it. I remember seeing all this stuff. And black people, how powerful. Let me just say this as I know we got to end soon. I don't want to though. I actually love this. We have good chemistry, man. I would say this: how powerful must you be when 12% of the population, we vacillate between 12 and 13%. We've never really hit 14. We stay in that space, and I'm part of the problem because people like me not having kids. Sorry, don't want them. But how powerful? What is so magical about you, black people? I'm talking to you now. Whether you're in a mixed race family, whether it's just you, whatever the case is, if you make up a part of this 13% in any way, something is so magical and frightful and fearful about you that every time somebody come into this country to be American, you are the bargaining chip. Hating you is the main bargaining chip. And if you don't know your value, if you don't know your worth, I did not know that my family had ties to a Fred Hampton, or that my grandmother was great friends with Mamie Till. Mamie Till is buried about 20 minutes from my home now. My grandmother is a few steps away on the same plot, right? Like I did not know that they were that good of friends. And I remember feeling so robbed, Chris, because I'm like, man, I done did so much dumb shit. I done thought I wasn't worth shit, and I was just poor, and like I was relegated to this life, living in shelters and striving and all that stuff. But I didn't know that I had some ties to some of the most powerful leaders that this country has ever seen. So black people, when I'm telling you, when you don't know your history, and when you keep letting them take your history, and then you don't read about your history, but we end up praising gangsters and Nino Brown and people like that, and put all our faith in rappers. And I love rap music. I just don't think they should be my civil rights leaders, right? I think there has to be a role. There is a reason. Ask yourself the extra question of why is that happening? Because if you knew who you were and what you came from, and that so many forces were working to keep you down, you would not be able to be stopped. So
and now you're
and be the agentic parent or student that you deserve and need, and we need you to be.
And this is why I think that is the power. The power that you just said, that I think people are going to get sick of me saying the same things over and over again, and I'm not going to stop. There is a difference between much of what we're talking about and the stuff that is happening to pass laws. When you just said, black people, you need to know your history. They don't. Not only do they not want you to know your history, they don't want other people to know your history, because right now their ability to take you over is to have everybody forget about what the country owes black people for their founding, right? A lot of people, I hear people say it all the time, like, my family wasn't even here during slavery. No, your family came after it was a fully developed ass country and walked straight to the front of the line and got jobs and stuff. And you never bought in. You never had to pay your equity to get in. It was free. You just got in. You came from a shithole country, European country, to the United States that had paved roads and had fully functioning systems where all of the economics of that had been based upon slavery, enslaving one group of people. So now it's their job to make you forget that, and to make everybody who comes here forget that. You've been here 5 minutes. Let's make sure you never hear this history. And the way that you do that is to wrap all that up and give it a name and call it the boogeyman, divisive concepts, critical race theory, whatever you need to call it, to outlaw it by law at the top, right? So now not only can they not learn what the best of what black people have thought and the best of what black people have put on paper and what we have to remember, now we can't learn it in those states either too, right? This doesn't just affect their children, right? It affects our children. You're a black child in one of those states, there are certain things your teachers can't tell you now. That's power. right? The power to control thought, just to control what you can think, what you can learn, what you can say, what you can believe is an ultimate power, right? And for all these people who are like, well, small government, this, that, and the other, and government's the enemy or whatnot, they sure are using government to stop you from thinking things they don't want you to think. They sure are using government to stop you from learning things they don't want you to learn, right? And what is it that they don't want you to learn? Bro, listen, in some states, if a teacher invited you in as a community expert and you came in there talking about Akbar or talking about Asa Hilliard or reading some of that stuff in class, do you know that teacher would get fired?
That's crazy.
Right? So there are states right now that if you knew a black educator in one of these states and they invited you in as a community expert to talk about everything you talk about right now, that teacher the next day could be fired. Not just fired because the district wants it, but because it's a state law that if they brought you in to talk about any of this stuff, right? No, what's the book? Know Thyself?
You can be fired the next day for teaching some black stuff. You know what that sounds like? You can do anything you want to your slave. You can do anything you want to your slave except teach them how to read. We have done shows as Eight Black Hands about the rubber room, about sexual assaults, about all these things. We have seen video of people being admitted and all this stuff, and then they cannot be fired. But you can be fired if I let you learn about from a black person. Like, what is that? That's slavery. You can do you can do anything imaginable to this person that you quote unquote own, except teach him how to read, except teach her how to read. And Chris, like was it when we were in Minneapolis? I don't remember, when we were at the airport together and I was telling you about my cousin who was this historian that I had just not known. And then like he had all these original documents of like my family and these codes and like from the man who bought his freedom to like this long line of people, original marriage documents. And, but basically they found it like the free land in between Chicago, what would become Chicago and Indiana. But like, I didn't know that. I'm like I'm sitting with you in the middle of this airport about to cry. Like, cause it's like, I come from that. Like, I thought it was just dope dealers and dope fiends in my, you know what I'm saying? I'm in my fucking mid 30s. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, that is what they are. I can't do I've done so much dumb stuff, Chris. I've done so much dumb stuff. But if I knew that, I would be walking through this world so different. That's why you cannot know your history.
I love that you said that, because they don't attack things that they don't think is powerful for you. They only attack the things that they think you can use for power. That's why they're attacking voting. That's why they're attacking the teaching of history and the teaching of these concepts, because there's power in that. So if we are talking about real parent power, the first thing is, yes, you have to know your child. Yes, you have to know how to work with the school. Yes, you have to know how to work with the teacher. But that's like not black belt knowledge for a black power person, right? A black power person needs to know how these same plays have been played on us many times and we got through them. A black person needs to know what you said about the Rainbow Coalition and about Fred Hampton. That is an essential lesson. That is not a throwaway line. That is an essential lesson, that what you just said, if I would have known these things, I would have walked differently through the world. I would have felt myself differently or whatnot. There are things that you can teach black children. You can teach brown children. You can teach Mexicans. You can teach trans kids about themselves that are empowering to themselves, where they start feeling themselves and understanding that they have a rightful place in this world. That is a problem for the system. People understanding themselves and understanding their power and their history is a problem, right? So what we need is more problem childs, more problem children, right? This hat, see what it says, problem child? The system is so bad it deserves problem children, right? It deserves children who actually buck the system, because that's a sign of intellectual academic health, is to buck the system that's wrong. And you can't do that if you have no information. What you just said is absolutely like essential. Like it's such a powerful morsel. You have it in your book, as a matter of fact, of parents teaching the history at home.
Yes.
And I want to end on this, because I think this is where some power is. In your book, you have a chapter on teaching young people the history at home. So what do you talk about that a little bit, because this could wrap us up. I think there's real power in it.
And even before all this stuff was happening with these groups, well, it's never really not been happening, if we're going to be honest. But we can't expect them to teach us of the various things that could take them down, right? That could end or change those systems. But that's your duty and your responsibility. And what I would say is, you might not know it, which is okay. That just means that y'all need to be learning together. When I was a kid, I remember there was always one kid on the block that would have Encyclopedia Britannica. And I remember wanting that so bad, Chris. I felt like if I could have had Encyclopedia Britannica, I could be free, right? Now everybody got it, and it's called Google, and don't nobody use it, right? It was such a cherished thing. It was such a cherished thing, right? When Black people wasn't able to read, we risked our lives to learn. Now it's readily available, and we arguing about, well, the test score don't mean nothing. It is like multiple things can be true at once. So parents, communities, leaders, what is the story of your family? What is the story of that town? What is the story of that church? Like, even when I went back to Paducah, Kentucky, which is so much smaller than what I remembered as a kid, and this place that my grandmama loved, we lived right across the street from this Black man who was the second leader of the boys club. It was like the second Black leader. I'm like, wait, what is this story? Like, I lived across the street from this man's house. It's now streets named after him. It's like, I never knew that. And you feel robbed. I'm really hurt, right? Like, there's a lot of pain there, right? Because it's like, man, I would have did things so different if I knew that I was every place I've lived, Oakland, Chicago, Maywood, Paducah, Kentucky, Stockton, California, all these places has a history when I now am learning where I was surrounded by not just great Black people, but extraordinary people that look like me, that had the same skill sets that I got. And I never knew. So I did dumb stuff because I didn't owe anything to anybody. I didn't know ancestors that I needed to pay that type of respect to, that I needed to carry on the lineage. So now I'm unlearning and living out these mistakes and trying to just be a whole person. I might have all these other things, but there are so many holes inside of us as a people when you can't go back. I don't know. I know one great grandmother named Rosie Mallory. Outside of that, I don't know who she was married to. I don't know what her mama name is. I don't know any of that. And so a piece of us has been taken. There has to be a reconciliation, but we have to own that responsibility. And when I was in that airport with you, and you were really supportive, you even bought me the book that was like listed there. And I really appreciate that, man. It's one of the best gifts I've ever gotten, man. Like, I've cried in front of y'all like twice. One was around Dirk, and then that one where I was really working hard not to, because I felt shame. Like, I felt so ashamed, man. Like, how do I not know that I come from this? How do I not know that there was me and you looked at a 17-year-old man that last name was Cole, dressed to the nines, right? About to go off to the Civil War. Like, and looked good and had a family and all this stuff. And I share that man's name. How could I do some of the dumb shit that I've done if I knew that person existed and what he did for me? If I knew what price was paid for me, not in the abstract, like, we share blood. That is why they banning your fucking books. That is why they telling you that these people are your enemy. That is why everything is up that's supposed to be down, and everything that is supposed to be down is up, right? They need you messed up in the head. This is a mental illness that we all are currently sharing, but here's the beautiful part. With these internets and these phones and all this stuff, we can change that. It might take step by step at a time, but there will be somebody 6 generations from now that know who a Chris Stewart is and know who a Charles Cole is by the fruits that we're about to bear. And I hope that anybody watching this joins in on that crusade, because we, like them, have to stop playing the next year game and play the next 5 centuries game. And that's how it ended.
I love it. And that's a good place to stop. My kind of just putting the top on it is, number one, to say, go out and go to Charles's website and get the book. I just want to make sure we dropped it into the chat so that people could see it. It's called the Agentic Black Parent ebook. It's a practical guide for parents wanting to get the most out of their child's school. I think we went a different place in terms of level of power, because this book actually gives you the skills to get in the game and to fight for your child. And I think what happens once you start doing that is you do start feeling yourself, and you start flourishing into fighting all the battles for your children, right? And it includes this battle of not letting there be a coordinated effort to make people dumber about you, and definitely not to make you dumber about yourself, right? I think this thing that you just said, Charles, is like everything in a soundbite, like what you just talked about. The game always was to separate us from ourselves, separate us from our history, from our knowledge of self, from our knowledge of the world, from our contributions, to make us feel like we never did anything, we never accomplished anything, we were nothing until 1619, until somebody made us something here. And it's that's actually cultural suicide. That's the thing. That's the poison that is put into our water that kills us. It kills us. It makes us dead in the head. And that's why you need a war on drugs at some point, whatever, is because you have so done that to so many of this group and then redline them all together that it creates cultural chaos and it creates kind of a lot of negativity. The only antidote to that is knowledge. The only antidote to that is knowing the things they don't want you to know. So be subversive, parents. If you listen to me right now, there is real power in knowing the things they don't want you to know. Right? The descendants of slave owners have a vested interest in being ignorant about your story, because to be honest about your story and to understand it would mean they have to give up something, and they're not in the business of giving up anything. Your one true power is the knowledge of self, the knowledge of your history, the knowledge of heritage, and to implant that in your children so that they don't live out the lie. They don't live out the big lie. The big lie isn't about elections being stolen. The big lie is about how we have ordered this society for the benefit of one group over everybody else, and we can't tell the truth about that. That's the big lie. That's the lie that kills us all. So, Dr. Cole, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you so much, my brother. And you have an open invitation. And if you write something else that could give us this much of a fruitful conversation, I will be happy to happy to have that conversation again, my brother. Appreciate you so much.